So you may have already heard about this, but for those who haven't, David Lynch, the infamous artist, has recently passed away at the age of 78. And I say artist because his career kind of covered everything. He was a renowned filmmaker, TV creator, musician, painter, actor. I mean, if anyone's seen the Spielberg movie The Fabelmans, and he makes a cameo at the end of that film as John Ford. It's quite ironic. You have a legendary filmmaker in Lynch playing another legendary director in John Ford, and his 2-minute little scene at the end of that film it's one of the best parts of the film, and his boring as shit line. I forever quote that line, even in that accent as well. But with regards to Lynch, I know that this sort of will get bandied about a lot in film criticism discourse, but I think for Lynch it really does apply. He was a visionary. I think that you cannot argue that. He had such a unique voice as a filmmaker, one of the most distinct voices I think you'll ever find in cinema, particularly in more recent-ish cinema. He was most prominent probably during the 80s and 90s and into the 2000s. As a sort of more contemporary filmmaker, he was one of the greats and one of the most influential on those who saw his films. And before I carry on properly with this video, of course, my best wishes and my heart goes out to his friends, family, his colleagues, those, of course, closest to him. I wish him all the best, of course. But I was honestly struggling on how to go about this, because I really wanted to address this properly, but I didn't feel like a little community post or a quick little tribute video where I just say that. I don't think that would really cut it for David Lynch, because he's a filmmaker who I've admired from afar, but it's only as time has gone on that I've really appreciated what he does, and it's very much an acquired taste in what he does. But they're also very personal films, and they tap into very personal feelings within the viewer. They're not puzzles to be solved, and they are very much experiences to feel. And whatever somebody's favorite David Lynch film is, it says a lot about you and your own experiences, and it's almost like what you bring to the table. So in addition to addressing the very sad news of his passing, I wanted to also sort of celebrate his filmography and what he has brought to the world, and celebrate that legacy that he has left us with, because it's worth celebrating. Now, I will confess that I am a relative sort of novice to Lynch's work. I've only seen a handful of them, so I haven't seen his first film, Eraserhead, one of the just most bizarre and fascinating films out there, for a debut feature. You also have some of his more, I suppose, straightforward films that aren't as loose and dreamlike, so films like The Elephant Man, which I'm really looking forward to watching at some point. The Straight Story is another one. I suppose his version of Dune, it's often seen as a bit of a black sheep for him, but it's interesting, I suppose. In terms of television, of course, you have Twin Peaks, which is one of the most influential shows that's ever been made. I've never seen it. I really want to. I'm pretty bad with TV shows keeping up, but Twin Peaks is one I really want to watch, because that's kind of a cornerstone of his career, really. But I figured with this video I'd kind of talk about the things of his that I have seen, and I want to just explore what I have seen and the impact that it's left on me. Because even though I've seen a total of 3 of his films, each of them have left a huge impression on me. And considering the amount of films that I check out, there are so many that just sort of fall through the cracks and I forget in a week after watching them, but not these ones. So the first film of his that I watched was nearly 2 years ago now, actually, with Mulholland Drive, which is probably his most acclaimed film, and it's very out there. It's probably not the best one to watch as a first one, and if you remember my 2023 monthly rankings in the May film ranking, I talked about it, you can see my sort of first reaction from when I'd only just seen it there, and you can see very much how I really liked it, but I didn't have a clue what was going on. Mulholland Drive is a great film. I have no idea what the f*** it was about. The interesting thing about it, though, is that even though I didn't get what it was going for by the end, something about it still captured my imagination. It's still I was still engaged. I was still intrigued to try and figure out what was going on, and the mood that the film creates, and this vibe of the sort of the dark, seedy nature of LA, kind of under the guise of this happy kind of. It's all, good, and there's it sort of explores Hollywood, and, Betty, Naomi Watts' character, she's a, an aspiring actress, and when you're sort of discovering that darkness underneath all of that, I think it always really stuck with me, that kind of juxtaposition of the light and the dark. it was really interesting. And as I say, even though I didn't understand it, 2 years on, that film really does still stick with me. I would say it's probably gotten better in my mind as the years have gone on, or the 2 years have gone on. The next of his films that I watched was Wild at Heart, which stars Nicolas Cage. That's kind of one of the main reasons I checked it out, because, you know, Nicolas Cage is a bit of a meme. He's been on kind of a bit of an in-joke with me and good friend Mr. R Productions. But yeah, this is kind of like sort of prime David Lynch, like 1990s. That's when kind of Twin Peaks was, he was making that. So this is kind of like prime David Lynch. And it's not as weird. It's still really weird, you know, some of the Wizard of Oz imagery in that film, some of the bonkers characters and really quirky characters like Willem Dafoe's and what's his name, Bobby Peru, like this like sort of hitman character who's just all kinds of weird and wacky and crazy. It's a really entertaining film. I think probably the most entertaining of his that I've seen. You know, Laura Dern and Nick Cage as these kind of young lovers on the road, and you know they're trying to escape all these weird people that is it Ripley, Laura Dern's character, but her parents are sending them after to get Sailor who'd been arrested, and it's a really entertaining film. But it's still got these kind of weird imagery, as I said, the Wizard of Oz kind of imagery, and then also some more visual storytelling, so stuff like the fire motifs. To me, that kind of read as their passion as a young couple, their sort of wild passion, hence the title Wild at Heart, you know. But you know, it's been a year, 2 years since I've seen these two films, and the thing is, even though it has been that long, and sometimes my memory of films can cheat, you know, the memory can cheat. Sometimes you kind of sort of drift away from a film, you don't quite really remember what you think of it. These two films are films that have really stuck with me, and what I think is interesting is that even though at the time I would have said I preferred Wild at Heart, but also just very entertaining, and I probably would say I'd prefer it over Mulholland Drive. Now I think Mulholland Drive is the better film, and that's the interesting thing, how they don't leave you. They really do stick with you, these emotions and these feelings that these films kind of conjure within you, and they're not puzzle boxes to solve. They're not these jigsaws that you have to try and work out the pieces of, okay, what's this? Is it real? Is it a dream? That's not what it's about. It's about what do you get from it. And the really interesting thing overall is that, yes, even though I didn't fully understand some of these, like Mulholland Drive especially, that's a film that, if you're not into that kind of style, you can be very easily turned off from it. If you don't get it, or you kind of feel a bit uncomfortable, because David Lynch films can make you feel uncomfortable with they explore these like subconscious things and dreams and sort of the human psyche and stuff to do with sex and the seedy underbelly of our society, and the kind of, he often critiques like the American dream and the American suburbia. That's often a critique in a lot of his films, and revealing the darkness underneath all of that. It can be uncomfortable when it's portrayed through a Lynch lens. It can be uncomfortable, but I think there's still something that it captures within you, and you know, it could be very easy to be turned off by these films, but I wasn't. I found them really, really interesting. And with Lynch's passing, it really kind of spurred me on to finally try and watch more of his films. So I finally watched what's probably his most accessible film in terms of his general style, and that is Blue Velvet, which has now genuinely become a new favourite of mine. It's amongst now the films that have had this big impact on me, on my life. So films like Cars, The Wizard of Oz, the original Star Wars trilogy, the Lego Movie, Inside Out, Back to the Future, Shaun of the Dead, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Goodfellas, Alien, 1917, Whiplash, Sunset Boulevard, 12 Angry Men, etc., etc. Blue Velvet is now on that level in terms of the films that have had that impact on me. As I mentioned, Lynch kind of critiques this sort of American dream, and that's very evident in Blue Velvet. You know, these kind of, the opening shot is of those picket fences and the roses and the sort of the fire engine that goes by, and the school traffic warden crossing the kids to school. A very idyllic picture of the American suburbs and sort of the American dream. Laura Dern's character is literally called Sandy, and kind of feels very modelled off Sandy from Greece. You know, a film that is very nostalgic to the 50s and 60s. And Blue Velvet on the surface kind of feels like very nostalgic to retro styles. I mean, the song Blue Velvet, there's performances of that from the character of Dorothy. In fact, that whole club section, it has that very retro aesthetic with her costume and the old sort of fashioned microphone. But then as that film goes on, it explores that darker underbelly of society, and I think it's probably the best way that it's done. I mean, probably because of the character of Frank Booth, who's played by Dennis Hopper, who's probably for me one of the best movie antagonists out there, easily like a top 10 of all. You know, Dennis Hopper's performance is unhinged. He is a demented, insane person. He is horrible, despicable. He's terrifying. The build-up to him is terrifying, and it's what he does to Dorothy is horrible. And without getting too personal, I see a lot of myself in the character of Jeffrey, who Carl McLachlan plays and whatnot. I feel like, you know, a young adult there's a kind of like contrast of darkness and innocence in the film, and you know, Jeffrey is exposed to all of this horrible stuff that Frank does and all these cronies and whatnot. In a way, I sort of saw myself in that. As you get older, I think it's an important film in that sort of sense as a young adult. Certain things with how Jeffrey has all of this knowledge of what's happened, of all these people. He knows everything. He has that power, but it's what does he do with it? How, he has the power to bring these people down, but how does he go about doing it? Should he do it? These are really interesting questions that just I just found really interesting, and it really engaged me, and I really, really connected with the film in ways that I didn't expect to. A part of me doing this video was I really wanted to talk about Blue Velvet and the kind of impact that it's had on me over the past sort of few days. Yeah, even though I only watched it a few days ago, it has become a new favourite, and I wanted to kind of get that across of how Lynch's films are very personal to who watches them. I sort of came to it at quite a kind of appropriate time in my life when I watched it, and kind of the things I took from it, and also just the general filmmaking. The performances are genuinely phenomenal. So with how much Blue Velvet had an impact on me, I don't feel like it will ever be topped with the future Lynch films that I watch. Even something like Elephant Man, which I'm really looking forward to checking out, and I feel like I'll get along really well with. And that's, I think, the great value in what Lynch did. He would challenge audiences. His films weren't easygoing. You would have to very much pay attention, but also you had to kind of bring something to the table, in a sense. It was very much what you got from it. And sometimes that does include confronting the uncomfortable, even though his films can often be uncomfortable, and he's kind of the weird director. He's often I've been labelled him as the weird director and whatnot. I also think he shows a great deal of empathy in his films. I mean, look at the end of Blue Velvet with the character of Dorothy, I think. So yeah, this is my silly little tribute video to David Lynch. Very more personal, one, and more unscripted. But I wanted that to show. I wanted it to just be me expressing how these films have impacted me, because they really have. Not many directors' filmographies can do that in the way that Lynch did, and that really was the magic that he had as a filmmaker. How they could impact so many different people, and that's what I want to continue the conversation and continue that sort of celebrating what he brought to the world. So I want to continue open that discussion in the comments of what Lynch films have you seen? What's your favourite? How do you connect with his films? I really want to hear it all. And so thank you for watching the video, and of course to David Lynch, may you rest in peace.